Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to Lost in the Wasteland, my weekly interview show where I learn a little bit more about somebody else's perspective on movies. And I have a very special guest this week as I get to speak to one of the actors from the new baseball film, Eephus, and John Smith Jr. Thank you so much for coming on.
My absolute pleasure, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you coming on. And just to give a little bit of background, this is from director Carson Lund and tells the story of a grown men's recreational baseball game stretches to extra innings on their beloved field's final day before demolition. This definitely, as a longtime baseball fan and somebody who used to play baseball, this definitely brought a lot of feelings back.
Oh,
Getting a
it's
chance to
been
watch
that's been
this.
a theme for everybody
Yeah.
that's seen it. Yeah. Yeah, it struck a chord with a whole lot of people.
My brother and I at one point, it's like when we were both kind of done playing like little league and how far we went, it's just like it'd be so much fun one day to just like join in like an adults league and get out there and play some. So this definitely hit a particular chord. But I guess for you, John, before we jump into the talk about the film a little bit, how about tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, okay. Um, I came into film kind of because of COVID, actually. I've been doing local theater around here for almost 30 years. I'm,
Hmm.
a Shakespeare actor. I've done plays in northern, southern Connecticut for, forever. But when theaters shut down, I got a random email from a friend of mine with an audition notice for a short film, The Woodsman, which was a horror comedy. And he's this guy you've written all over it. And I'm like, I don't do movies. My wife's like, hey, go do this one. I was like, I don't do it. She goes, hey, you know what? Just do the tape. Did the tape. I booked it. We shot it over two freezing cold nights. And we did like a year and a half worth of festival run. And it was just at that point, I'm like, I guess there's no turning back. So dove right in. And actually, Eephus was like the second or third thing I ever booked.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And I guess this is a nice segue into talking a little bit about Eephus, but what drew you to this project?
The audition notice actually, I submitted for Troy, who's the pitcher for the opposite team, actually.
Mhm.
Um, because the breakdown was described a middle-aged, overweight dude, Lebowski. And I was like, um, my wife's like, man, they just put down cast John Smith. So I sent everything in, and I guess they took a look at it, Carson and Mike and Nate, and went, yeah, no, that's our guy. So let's see what he can do. And yeah, I read for it, and it went beautifully.
Awesome. I guess what were some of the things that really stood out to you? Like, obviously, you mentioned that you're for years at this point much more of a theater actor. What were some of the experiences, getting in front of a camera for this film that really stood out to you?
Yeah, this was the first like full feature I'd done. I mean, I had done some background work very early on when my kids were young, and I could like I was running back and forth to the city and doing
Mhm.
some film work there, but um, this was the first real major like full feature I did, and it was wild, man. It was just such I'm so used to living a story from beginning to end every day. You know, you
Mhm.
do you do a play and it's like you start page one, you end page 75. And that's just how it goes. Beginning to end every day. You live that life straight through. And the hardest thing and the most interesting thing about the work was to be able to start and stop somewhere along that line at any point during
Mhm.
the day, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and chasing light and chasing the just the right angles and the way that the sun would hit the trees right, and we'd have to be okay. We're filming now, and
Mhm.
everything would stop and we'd get there. Um, that was probably the wildest thing was the start stop and the start in the middle. But it's people have asked me, is it different? I mean, like the acting part of it isn't all that much different.
Mhm.
It's they're similar muscles, but they're different. Um,
Mhm.
it's you do the sort of the same general thing. It's like doing you're doing a curl, you're doing a push up. I mean, you're still working your arms. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So it's that sort of a differential, I guess.
Yeah, and I can imagine, especially because this film, there's so much to it that's about like the lighting and everything and the time of day. I can imagine there's a lot of having to deal with that, especially because like at some points, like it's a big part of the story that
Oh,
it gets
yeah.
dark.
Yeah, it's
So,
yeah, I mean the whole idea of chasing the light is actually part of the film. And
mm,
that was probably the wildest thing about the whole project was we weren't all that in on the end game,
mhm.
right? We actually filmed all 9 innings. All 27 outs got filmed. Um, so somewhere out there, there is a 9 inning cut of this film. Um,
Nice.
it's we cut down like 3 hours into an hour and a half.
Mhm,
Um, but um, there was just this the Carson's vision of it all of chasing the
mhm,
the dying embers of a time. We didn't really know. We played it straight up as um, we're in the middle of a game. We just played it as a straight comedy. We didn't know all of the background and all of that beautiful artwork that he did with
mhm,
the camera and the editing. We weren't in on the joke,
mhm,
which I think really makes it fly that much more
mhm,
because we really just played that as we're losing this field and we're not that happy about it.
mhm. Which, and I think one of the biggest things for me having watching the film and the experience of it was this felt so authentic because all of you felt so like I felt like I was watching a bunch of friends out there on a baseball field and dealing with it was like I played baseball. I love baseball, but there's slow moments. There's those moments where
Oh
you're just
yeah.
like standing in the field, just being like, somebody like I mentioned, like I played first base, so the ball wound up at me a decent amount, but like in the outfield, it's like sometimes you're just standing there, you're just like
Yep. The whole inning and you got nothing to do. Yeah,
nothing
you
to
just
do.
it's like, okay, great. That's three
Yep.
strikeouts. Wonderful. Okay, cool. Can I go sit down now? Because it's boring out here. But
Well, I think one of the interesting things too was tonally, which is interesting that you mentioned like you all weren't in on the joke of what this film was going to be, because I went in with, it's hard not going into a film without expectations. Like I read the synopsis, like I kind of had an idea of what this would be. I was kind of expecting like a fun, silly comedy, but there was a lot of weight
yeah,
to the whole experience. But I could definitely see like you all were like playing this game and having this time and stuff like that. I guess since that's such a big difference, I guess after, because I'm assuming like you've gotten a chance to watch the film
oh
and
yeah,
did
yeah.
the
I've seen it several
experience,
times now.
as somebody who's part of the project and now seeing the project, what was something that really stood out to you about this film and what you're most proud of about it?
I think what the camaraderie that you see,
Hmm.
that I think is probably the greatest gift we all got out of this. Um, we all lived together
Hmm.
for the most part, the team. Actually, both teams. We stayed at a lodge at a closed summer camp for the fall and into
Hmm.
the winter. We had a big lodge where most of us stayed, and even the guys that were commuting that were local by the end of the shoot had moved in.
Hmm.
Um, so we had this big kitchen and big open room. So we would do family dinners every night, and we would hang out. We really did. We became a family. They're still people that I'm very, very tight to, and when we all get together for anything, it's just joy. When we were at New York Film Festival, we actually did another pickup game because
Nice.
why wouldn't you? Um, so it's always a party when I see them. It's a family reunion, and I think that camaraderie, that ability of us living together and being together all the time, and really getting to know each other, that banter, a lot of it is scripted. I would say probably Carson says it's about 90% scripted. I think it's probably 85-15.
Mhm.
Uh, but most of the banter is scripted. But there's some stuff that he was just like, you know what? It would be a travesty if I didn't give these guys a little bit of free reign
Yeah.
because there's I know there are several of those that I know that I made up and have made the cut to the film, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, you like that one? That one's good. Okay, cool.
And
But
that's awesome. And I can imagine someone like yourself who was in theater for so long before getting into film. If you're doing a show, you're spending a lot of time with people on a day-to-day basis and really making that connection. So
yep,
getting that opportunity to really build that camaraderie on this film. And also, I feel like it's really important for the story being told here because like the audience is expected to see a group of guys that have been playing together for a long time and really feeling that. And that was one of the biggest takeaways for me is like I legitimately felt like I was the guy with the box score who just showed up to watch this game this day.
dude,
Um,
Franny was one of the best characters I think they made up for this thing. He was, oh man, and Cliff nailed him. Oh,
mhm.
he is the heart and soul of this film.
Absolutely. And obviously, like the audience, we didn't get to turn into an umpire towards the end. But being able to sit there and really feel that experience was awesome. I always like to ask this as like a final wrap-up question, talking about a film, but what's the one thing, what if you had to pitch this to somebody to check this out, what's the one thing you're gonna tell them why they should check out Eephus?
If you like to laugh and cry at the same time for different reasons, this is the film for you.
I can definitely understand that based off of having watched it. Because there's definitely very funny moments, and there's definitely moments where you just like, I kind of felt down like by the end, where it's just like, I'm sad that they're not going to be able to do this anymore. And I think that's something really special about the film. There's something especially particularly impactful about some of those final shots
Hmm.
as like everybody's like going off, the game's over.
The
Um,
wrap up. Yeah.
the game is over and this field's not going to be here anymore. And there's something special about that really hit for
Yeah,
sure.
that was I think we filmed those week 4 of 5. So we knew we were getting close. So
Mhm,
there was a lot of that really in a lot of us. It was the end of the night. It was like the last of the night shoots too. And
mhm,
we kind of knew that end was coming. So there is a lot of that real, wow, this is almost done kind of feeling in all of us to begin with. And
mhm,
then to have that moment to be able to say goodbye to that fielding character was actually kind of nice, you know?
mhm.
It was like a nice little closure for everything for the film.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everybody out there, especially if you're a baseball fan, I don't feel like we get a whole lot of baseball movies anymore. I definitely grew up watching a lot of baseball movies.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I
I was
did
very
too. I mean, we called this thing Sandlot for grown-ups from day one. So it's
it really has that vibe for sure. And I was very excited to check this out. So, it's one, if you really love baseball and want to see a great baseball movie, go check this out. And just in general, this is a really well done, impactful film with a lot of great, authentic performances, and you really just connect with the whole experience. I know this one's been slowly rolling out places, so make sure to go check out where you can find the film and it's a nice nostalgic little trip as well for sure.
there is a list of theaters where and cities where we're playing. It is on the Music Box website. That's our
Awesome.
distributor, Music Box. Oh, what is it? I can't remember now. Musicboxfilms.com.
Mhm.
There's an Eephus page, and there is a list of the cities, the theaters within those cities, and the opening date.
Awesome. I will make sure to include that in the description for the video so you all can check
Excellent.
it out for sure. Now, let's learn a little bit more about you, John. So, this is always a fun opening question because some people have like an exact answer and others like, how can I choose? Well, what's your favorite film?
I am in the latter category.
Yep.
There are way too many to really pick, but I mean, if I have to, if you're gonna really make me choose, I mean, I today,
Mhm.
you know,
Fair.
um, but is probably The Great Escape.
Awesome.
That was something that was a family tradition. It was on TV every year. My father
Mhm.
would have left my mother for Steve McQueen. So we would watch that anytime it was on. And it didn't matter if it was the sunniest day of the summer. If it was on, my dad was like, "Yeah, you don't have to go outside today."
Yep.
watch this. So, and we
Watching
would
The Great
watch
Escape.
that. Yep. And so that probably is at this point probably my favorite.
I got my DVD somewhere up there. I'm a huge fan of that film. I grew up in the same household with my grandparents, and my grandpa loved war movies. And like he fought in World War II. He didn't talk about the war, but he did love watching war movies, and that was one that we watched a lot when
Yeah,
I
my
was a
grandfather
kid.
was the
Was the
same way.
Mhm.
Would not would not talk, but you know what? If it he'd be more than happy to watch people shoot Nazis.
Yep,
It was he was that was a great one that was always on. There was Dirty Dozen he loved.
yep.
So yeah, no, those were a staple when I was a kid.
Absolutely. And the Great Escape is a fantastic film, and that cast is insane.
Oh,
I
dude.
just top to bottom, so many incredibly talented people.
I had the unbelievable opportunity when I took a Shakespeare workshop
Mhm.
100 years ago in Stratford, Connecticut. There used to be a Shakespeare theater there. There was the American Shakespeare Theater. It was huge,
Yeah.
and anybody that was anybody had been on that stage. It sadly burned down a few years ago, but we were in a Shakespeare workshop there with John Barton from the Royal Shakespeare Company,
Mhm.
and David McCallum was part of the class. And if, for anybody that doesn't know, Dave McCallum played Ashley Pitt, who was one of the
Yep.
British officers in The Great Escape. And they all were going over at the end of the workshop before the dinner to go and do a tour of the theater. And David was like, "No, I'm gonna stay here. You see one theater, you've seen them all."
Mhm.
And we sat down. It was him and I and my wife, a couple of the other students that were there, and Charles Durning, and we just killed about 3 or 4 bottles of wine and just bullshitted for hours on end until they got back. And it was
That's
probably
awesome.
the coolest experiences I've ever had.
That is really awesome. And it's so funny because I also grew up watching NCIS with my mom and having him on that too. I'm like, it's Ducky.
Yep.
But bridging that gap over the course of decades. But that's a really awesome story. Thank you for sharing that. I guess turning things back, John, what's your earliest memory of going to the movies?
I think probably the earliest one I remember going to see
Hmm.
was probably I think it was when we saw Raiders of the Lost Ark because that was at a drive-in.
Awesome.
But I do kind of remember. I mean, I don't remember if I remember going to the theater, or if I remember being told that we did this.
Hmm.
A few years prior to that, I had gone with my mom and my grandmother to go see Rescuers. So it
Nice.
was one of those two. But I do remember going because that was a big deal with my dad too, because it was,
Hmm.
you know, had such a retro flavor for him for what he grew up on and what he dug. And it
Hmm.
was like, yeah, we got out of that and he was like, yeah, yeah, we are an Indiana Jones household. So,
Yeah. I it's a shame because we don't get a whole lot of like true through and through action adventures like that anymore.
yeah.
There was some towards like the late 90s into the early 2000s, but just Raiders is one of the most perfectly put together kinds of films. And I would have loved the experience of getting to see that. I know during COVID, I started going to a drive-in theater, which was such an interesting experience. And I can imagine that was such a fun time, just
Oh,
the
yeah,
whole
because
aesthetic of it.
that was back in the day when you didn't listen on a radio. Now
Mhm.
you go into a drive-in and they have their little AM
Yeah.
station and you listen on your car speakers. This is when we still had the speaker that was hanging on a stick and you stick
Yeah.
it in the window and you listen to this tinny audio with this giant screen. And
Yeah.
then I saw that there. I saw the first Ninja Turtles movie in a drive-in. I mean, I saw
Nice.
Pretty Woman in a drive. I mean, I've seen so much crap in a drive-in. I've seen stuff that I can't even remember. That it was just one of those things that was because you could go and they would run a double bill
Mhm.
and you'd go and be like the family action adventure kind of thing and then they'd run something for the parents. Oh, that was the other one was Search for Spock was
Oh,
in there
nice.
too, Star Trek 2. So that was or was that 3? I don't know. It was one of them.
I
It was
think
Search
that
for
was the
Spock.
third one because Wrath
Yeah,
of
that was
Khan
3.
was the
Wrath of
second
Khan was
one.
the second one. Yeah. So
I
yeah.
uh I started going to the Delsey Drive-In in New Jersey. It's the lone actual functioning drive-in in southern New Jersey. And it was so funny because I told my dad I started going there. He was like, I spend so much time in that drive-in not watching movies. I'm like, wow, dad.
Yeah, and yeah, those were things that as a Gen X kid, and you'd fall asleep in the back seat during the second movie, and then wake up to things that you shouldn't see. So it's like, Dad, come on, man, I don't need another brother. Take your tongue out of mom's
But
mouth.
it was really cool because they have two screens, and it was so funny because my wife and I went to go see. They were doing an anniversary of Toy Story, and they had like War with Grandpa because like that Robert De Niro movie that came out a couple years ago, and on the other screen they had back to back Harry Potter movies, and like I grew up watching Harry Potter, and I would just occasionally look over. I'm like, I know exactly what part of this movie this is, and it was just such an interesting experience for sure. If you get a chance to, people, you should go check out a drive-in sometime. It was
Seriously,
certainly a fun experience. But a couple of other kinds of favorite questions, but do you have a particular favorite genre of movies?
not particularly. I mean, I will watch it pretty much anything if it's well
Hmm.
done. I love sci-fi films. I love
Hmm.
westerns. I love comedies. I love screwball comedies. I love, you know, thinky art pieces.
Hmm.
It's the same sort of thing. It's like it, film is probably the one thing where it's like I'm much more picky when it comes to
Hmm.
theater.
Hmm.
Like I'm not gonna go see like a Neil Simon play very often anymore. I mean, and I think he was a brilliant writer. I think he's, most of his stuff I've
Hmm.
done, and I have tons of copies of his plays. But it's at this point I've seen so many. I'm like, I can't watch another version of The Odd Couple. I just can't. You
Yeah.
know, I'm done with musicals. I'm done with the spectacle. If I go to the theater, I want to go and I want to be um, made to cry, and that was what
Hmm.
we focused on when we had our theater company before COVID. Was we did plays like that,
Hmm.
and so I'm much pickier when it comes to stage than I am for film. Film, I'll watch anything. I don't really care.
But I can understand that. And I live close enough to New York City where like I can take a 30-minute drive, hop a train, and be in the city in about an hour and 15 minutes. And I do enjoy going to the city and seeing some shows. I think I've only seen musicals, but when they had what was it, Jeff Daniels doing To Kill a Mockingbird, or
Mhm.
I'll take a second mortgage out to go see the new Glengarry Glen Ross at this point. But I can understand that. And like that's the thing. Like I had dated somebody at one point who was former musical theater major, super into that. And it's just like she was like, why don't we go to the city more and go see these things? I'm like, first of all, my interest in film is cheaper. And the whole
That's
entire
that's
journey to
that's
go
a
to New
fifteen
York.
twenty dollar ticket day. I
Yeah,
mean, that's not even covering the train in for the two of you for that. I
exactly.
mean, because I'm in Southern Connecticut, so I have the
Yep.
same exact train ride just from a different direction.
Yep.
So I can get down there and do that anytime, and we don't, because it's astronomical. It's almost criminal. I mean, the last thing I think we went to go see on Broadway was, and shockingly, it was a musical, but
Hmm.
it was American Idiot,
Hmm.
which was technically a musical. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it we loved that thing. I mean, it struck such chords with all of us in the house because it
Hmm.
wasn't your bright and sunny, everything's going to be great musical. It was
Yep.
a your life kind of sucks musical. So we were like,
Yeah.
yeah. That's we it kind of struck home with a lot of us. I mean, my wife and I we're Gen X grunge kids, so it
Yes.
was very much we were like, oh, I see me on that stage,
There you
you
go.
know. And my daughter is, she's going to be 30 very soon. She just had
Hmm.
her birthday yesterday. So one of the things that we took her, that was her birthday present. She was maybe 10, 12. We went
Yeah.
back down, and it was when Billy Joe was in it,
Hmm.
and she was just beside herself.
Yeah.
She stood by the stage door. She waited for him. He did a bunch of signings. He started going back to his car, caught her out of the side of his eye, and because she had red hair, like red
Mhm.
streaks in her hair, big Buddy Holly glasses, and dressed in all black and her punk t-shirts. And he looked at her, he goes, "My people," and he walked right over. He goes, "What am I signing?"
That's awesome. I'm 33, so I definitely went through the whole Green Day was a thing. Green Day was a
Hmm.
big thing for a
Yeah.
long time there. So,
I mean,
um,
I remember when they broke. I mean, it
mhm,
was they were one of those things that was like they caught such stick for like, oh, they sold out. It's like, no, everybody just decided they like punk music. Can you guys just calm down? I've been doing this since the early 80s. This is not, they're still what they started with, and they still
mhm,
sound exactly like the stuff I was listening to then. So
yeah,
back off, people.
back off. Do you have any particular favorite filmmakers?
Besides Carson,
There you
and
go.
Kyle who directed Woodsman, who actually are two of my favorite people on the planet. But I do like Spielberg. I mean, it's a thing. I mean, he's just brilliant at what he does.
Mhm.
It's cliche, but I don't care. Um, Hitchcock, I love. I like just that he could do suspense. He didn't do the shock, and I love horror movies too.
Yeah.
So it's like, but he could do suspense like nobody, you
Mhm.
know. Um, uh, who else do I like? Um, I'm blanking on stuff now. Yeah, yeah, it's
Well, you picked two amazing ones. So, well, and
yeah.
that's the
Well,
thing.
those are the good textbook answers, at
Yeah.
least.
Well, and I think Spielberg gets a bad rap for being like a populist kind of director making movies that a lot of people want to see, but he makes them so damn well
Yeah,
and absolutely incredible. So it's one of
and
those
it's
things. It's
you watch them, years and years and years later, and it's like they don't feel dated.
no,
It's yes, the outfits are all, but it really isn't dated.
mm,
It just almost it looks like you're doing it in vintage attire. You
yeah.
know, it all works. Everything still works. It's crazy.
Whether you go back and watch Jaws or Close Encounters or in any of the Indiana Jones,
The first Jurassic
like
Park.
Jurassic Park is insane that
It's like
that's 31 years old.
all of those effects still hold up, and it's like
Hmm.
wow. People, people, oh, Lucas, he went back and he messed with stuff. Yeah, he shouldn't have, but those effects, even in the original, don't hold up.
Yeah,
Stevens do.
yeah.
Even crappy Bruce that never worked on the set of Jaws still freaking works. And
And you do see the shark, it still works really well.
yeah,
So,
and that's it. I think those are one of those. It's one of those like beautiful accidents, like us
mhm,
living all together in Eephus and Bruce not working, having to be lessened in the film.
mhm.
It makes him all the more impactful when you see him. So it's like it's one of those happy accidents that you get on a film that you don't get pretty much anywhere else.
Because one of the first great shots that you get of it is when he's popping up out of that water, and Roy
Hmm.
Scheider's just like, and it's like you have the same feeling because you're
Yeah.
like, what?
Oh,
And when you finally see how just enormous that shark is, it's terrifying. Ugh, still hits. My grandmother never went back to the beach um, after Jaws came out.
I do not blame her in the least.
Nope. There's too many things out there, especially in New Jersey and this area where it's like you can see what's coming.
Hmm. And my
Like
wife's like, I don't go in any water. I don't see the bottom.
it's like this water is full of life and you can't see it. So and I don't trust that. So there you go. Now, kind of thinking about on the opposite end of things, do you have any particular favorite actors or actresses?
Um, Lots of them.
Hmm.
There are people who I've respected for forever,
Hmm.
that are just amazing to watch. It's like, and a lot of them are so, versatile. You look at someone like Patrick Stewart, who just
Yep.
throws himself into everything he did, and he's one of the things that I heard him say in an interview once. It sticks with me every day. Um, I do any sort of work, and he said that he didn't really start acting well until he started treating everything like Shakespeare. And it was one of those things that struck me as like, oh yeah, there's really, why am I putting this one on a pedestal? Why am I not just treating everything with this?
Mhm.
Wow, okay, no, it's always looking for the subtext, always looking, and it opened up a whole world, and that was just on stage, and then to
Yeah.
treat a film script that way too, and it was wow, okay, throw throw out all the direction, throw out all the stage direction, throw all the stuff, just focus on the lines because that's all that's ever is in Shakespeare is what you
Mhm.
have for what you're going to say, and I ignore all of that, and I just go right into the words and see what the words tell me first, and I respect him every day of my life because that was a lesson I learned from him. And De Niro is another one. He was like, "There's no such thing as right or wrong. There's only good or bad, and bad comes from
Mhm.
trying to do it right." And that was my biggest
Very
struggle
interesting.
as a kid.
Mhm.
Was always trying to impress a teacher and do it the way
Mhm.
they taught me. And once I got out of my own way, it was much easier. So those are two guys that are they favorite? I think they're ones that helped me along the way with just little snippets of wisdom that I heard in passing and went, "Oh, that makes total sense." But like um, Helen Mirren's another one that I just
Mhm.
I'll watch that woman read a phone book. Uh, she's brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and she's another. She just throws herself into it.
Mhm. Yeah, and going back to Patrick Stewart first, with whether he's in Star Trek, X-Men, he's committing. And
Everything.
like absolutely. And one of my long circular reason why, but like Logan's one of my favorite movies.
Oh, it's so
And
good.
the him and Hugh Jackman in that, it's like we're playing a guy, a psychic, and a guy with big metal claws, and you would not think that's the kind of movie that you're in. Especially because James Mangold goes headlong into making that into this gnarly, like weird neo-western that you're
Hmm.
watching, and they're just so committed to it. And Patrick Stewart's amazing, and whether it's like I grew up watching him in X-Men movies, and also I took Latin for 5 years, and we watched that I Claudius
Hmm.
miniseries, and him being in that with along with like an insane number of famous British actors
No, that is
in that
probably one of the greatest things Derek Jacobi has ever done. And he's done a
movie.
lot of good stuff.
Him as Claudius in that is amazing.
Just
Um,
genius.
I just remember Brian Blessed
Oh,
being
Brian
us.
Blessed was just, oh, ah,
Yep.
my first thing with him was Flash Gordon. That was the first
Yeah.
time I ever saw him on screen. I
Yep.
was like, this dude is awesome. And he's
Yep.
never changed. He is
Yep.
just a bundle of joy no matter what you see him do.
Mhm.
And that's the cool thing too, is a lot of these guys they're all Shakespeareans too.
Yep.
You know, there was a series that the BBC ran was called Playing Shakespeare that John Barton
Mhm.
did with a workshop with most of the guys that we're talking
Yeah.
about. And it's like, and they were your age.
Yeah, which is exciting.
Yeah, and
And
it's like I know people that still, watch that once a year because it just refreshes them on what they need to know.
and it's so great even seeing some of them just popping up and things randomly. My wife and I were binge watching Toast of London because I'm a humongous Matt Berry fan. And like Brian Bless just pops up as his dying father for one episode, and he's just so good, so committed to it, and it's just such a fun time, and just seeing that. And then I was just recording a podcast about the Untouchables with my friend, and
Hmm.
just how hard De Niro just completely committed to being Al Capone, being so over the top. And I quote that on probably an unreasonable regular basis. But just like he makes every line pop, and like baseball, and just that whole entire scene,
the,
just
the amount of times we
terror.
would walk around
Yeah.
the set, literally the amount of time we walk around, we'd have a bat and we'd just be like, part of a team.
Team.
It was ridiculous.
Absolutely. Um,
But if you like Brian Blessed, I'm telling you, if you haven't seen it, yes, it's Shakespeare, but Much Ado About Nothing, the Brana version,
oh,
is so, so good.
I have not watched that in a long time. I guess I forgot that he was in there, but I do remember him as in Hamlet.
Yes.
as his
As
father's ghost. And
yes.
that scene is just so powerful because just between his voice and the makeup and everything, just that's a 4 hour movie that does not feel like it's 4 hours and
No.
does not feel like how did I just sit there for 4 hours
I
and
saw
it
that
just
in the
flies
theaters.
by.
I saw that in the theaters where there was an intermission. It was me, my pregnant wife, and about 6 or 7 English professors.
Well, there you go. Fantastic. Now, do you have a particular film that you feel like you could just watch every day?
I there's so many. I mean,
Mhm.
I could put on Anchorman any day of the week. You know,
Yep.
there's movies that it's like, if it's on, it's on. You know,
Yep.
Star Wars is one of them, Indy's one of them, any of the Indies really.
Mhm.
You know, I could put on Better Off Dead or Dude, Where's My
Mhm.
Car? You know, Emperor's New Groove. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of the ones that I can do over and over again were like kids movies that when my
Yep.
kids were little, we would just put like Toy Story's not one of them because I'm so sick to death of Toy Story.
Fair.
Uh, oh my God, it would just and that was in the days before we had DVDs. So we'd get to the end and it'd be again, and you gotta wait for it to rewind.
Rewind.
Oh, that's how the longest 10 minutes in the world.
Here we go again. Luckily it's 75 minutes.
Yeah.
And
Yep. I can
um,
get dinner made.
yep, I appreciate Emperor's New Groove for sure.
Oh, he is the greatest Disney princess ever. Cusco is my absolute favorite Disney character. I love him.
The four of them, the voice actors at the
Hmm.
center of that, and just Richard Warburton just completely stole the show as Kronk. Because Kronk is
Oh, God. Is he doing his own theme music? Thank God I was asleep through this.
just every single line reading in that is just perfection. And like I grew up watching a lot of Seinfeld, and I'm just thinking like Putty,
Yep.
and just like devils.
Well,
And
I mean, I grew up watching the original Batman TV show.
mhm,
So, I mean, I've had a crush on Eartha Kitt since I could walk.
there you
And,
go.
it's like I'll listen to Yzma all day, every day,
Yep.
you know.
Oh, she's so much fun in that for sure.
There's a documentary out there on that about the making of it
Mhm.
and what an absolute shit show it was because it started off it was supposed to be like a traditional musical. I mean, Sting wrote
Yeah.
an entire score
Yeah.
and songs for it, and it was supposed to be this like big sweeping epic and
Mhm.
there were huge fights and it ended up there were two competing scripts and the comedy guys
Mhm.
won and
Yeah.
I guess at the end of the day, the funniest part of it is Disney locks away everything. You know, anytime
Yeah.
that's done, they come, they take the notes, they take the script. The guy comes in to goes, "Where's your script?" And the writers are like, "There's not a finished script. We just kind of did pages every day when we finished it, and we kind of wrote it as we went." So they go, "Well, what did you use?" And he points over to all these stacks of notes and boxes. Literally, the script to that movie is something like 6 or 7 bankers boxes of just BS from the writers' room.
Oh
It's
my.
just crazy. The whole story itself, if you can, I think it's on YouTube, but
Yeah.
if you can find it, it just
It's a
what a watch.
miracle
What a
that
watch.
or Shrek even made it to releasing, and they all worked.
Yeah,
So,
I have screenwriter friends and and other movie making friends. It was like basically we've come to the conclusion that any movie that gets made is a miracle. It just there's so
yep,
many moving parts, so many things that the wheels can come off on. I used to joke about how hard it was to get a theater production up, but uh, that you can do. I mean, we used to tell these, my wife, who she's a stage director, so she would tell her cast, she'd be like, "Look, you guys could do this on a porch, in a backyard. You don't need it.
mhm,
You're fine. You got this. Go out there." And it's like you can't do that on the film. You know what I mean? There's just way too many things that can go wrong, and it's all gonna stop.
yep, absolutely. That's wild. Do you have a particular film that you connect with because it relates to another interest of yours?
Not particularly. Um, it's like I said, I mean, I watch pretty much anything and everything, so
Mhm.
it's like I find the little things that's what I like to do when I watch a film, especially something that's a little more than just light entertainment.
Yeah.
When it's not just a straight slapstick or spectacle action movie. It's like I try and find something that's and if it does touch something, um, you know, Much Ado is probably the closest,
Hmm.
and Branagh's Hamlet, both of those because they did touch very much into 90% of my acting training is Shakespeare,
Yeah.
so that did strike a lot of chords. And I think the reason Anchorman sticks with me so much is because the rest of the training was pretty much improv.
Yeah.
So,
Which
it's like
that
that's
whole
the
entire
other side
movie
of
is
that brush,
just.
you know? So it's one of those things. It's like that's probably why they do stick with me as badly as they
Mhm.
do. But yeah, I mean, Much Ado was something that it's also one that brought my wife and I together when we were first
Mhm.
dating too. So there's a whole
Awesome.
lot of that as well.
I watched that. I feel like I watched that in middle school or early high school in an English class.
Oh, I'm
And
sure
I
you
haven't
did.
watched it since, but it was so charming. And that's one I definitely want to go back and rewatch at some point. But just Anchorman, the fact that they could make a whole entire second cut of the movie with backup jokes, because that's just how much just
That's how much
messing
there
around that
was.
they did.
Yep. Yeah.
And I would
When you have people that
kill.
are that funny
Yeah.
and you just let them go, and you've
Mm,
got you've got a director that's like, yeah, let them cook.
yeah.
Yeah,
Which I would love for Adam McKay to go back and do some straight up comedies at some point. Because even just like I was reading a story about Richard Jenkins and on the set of Step Brothers, and that whole entire thing about the dinosaur thing was made up on the spot. Like Adam McKay's like, I have an idea. When they said like what you wanted to be when you grew up, you wanted to be a dinosaur. And then like Concy Riley and Will Ferrell didn't know he was gonna say that. And like their reactions of like, you can't be a dinosaur, like you're a human. Like that was like reaction to this whole situation. And that's why it's so funny. Richard Jenkins just standing there with his, like short arms and stuff like that. I love him. And the
oh
fact
yeah.
that he completely commits to something so absurd like that is just so much fun. Oh, now, do you have a particular movie character or even expand this to like a stage character that you feel like you really connect with on a personal level?
I try and do that with anything I play. Actually, I try
Hmm.
and find that connection. Um, there's a little bit of me in everything that I do because if it's not,
Hmm.
it's fake. It's a lie.
Yeah.
You know. So I do a lot of times. I try and look. I'll take a look at a role and I'll be like, okay, this is what would I have to do in my life to get myself in this situation where I have to
Hmm.
make this decision? What what would have had to have gone wrong?
Hmm.
What series of bad decisions did I make to put me here, or what series of right decisions did I take
Yeah.
to put me on this pedestal? Like when you play Hamlet, and it's like you got to be the distraught and broken down and you weepy mopey
Hmm.
smack him upside his head Dane, and then because I've played that and I've played Claudius, so
Hmm.
it's like the complete opposite. I'm gonna save my country.
Yeah.
I'm now I did this for all of you. Why are you not thanking me? And it's you have to attach those personal moments to anything that you do, or it really is it's a lie, and the audience can tell. You can tell when someone's not really, like you say, he's committed to the bit. If
Hmm.
you're not, that's because he found his little inner 5-year-old that went, I want to be a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And you let that
You
little
believe
5-year-old
him.
come out and let
Yeah.
him go. It's like when with John in Eephus. I mean, it was his whole thing when I went into that. It was like because we had been calling it Sandlot for grown-ups. I was like, well, what if Ham was a 40-year-old plumber?
Yeah.
And literally that's how it started, and it was just it became that thought and bubblegum, and that was the entirety of John,
There you go.
and the f bombs. That was pretty much John's entire character.
Yeah. And we all know people like that for sure.
Well, and when my wife said she was, it was the hardest thing in the world to watch the first time because she watched it at home on a screener, um and she said it was so hard to listen to my disembodied voice screaming, dropping F bombs. She's like, I just, because I wasn't home. I
Yeah.
was off doing another film, and she's watching it by herself. She's like, I thought you were in the basement and the furnace was broke again.
There you go. That's a I imagine that's a very interesting experience, but I appreciate that answer, and especially because, you know, you're right. And a lot of times, like I've never been in that experience where like I was acting in something, but I know watching something, I'm like, the quickest thing to notice is if somebody's not committed to something. And then you're out of it. It's just
Hmm.
like, why do we care? But we believed Richard Jenkins wanted to be a dinosaur, and that's why the
Because
gag
he believed
works.
he wanted to be a dinosaur, and that's
Dinosaur.
and that's the whole thing. It's like my wife always said that was her always her favorite note to give me when she would watch anything I did. She's like, quit putting it on from the outside. You're
Mhm.
making me cringe.
Well, there you go. It's a good word of advice. Very
Mm.
straight, very straightforward.
She is my best acting coach I've ever had.
There you go. Now, what's a film that you love that you feel like would surprise people?
Um, I don't. Boo.
Well,
That's
and
a good
it's
question.
an interesting question because generally it's like how I came thinking about this episode is and this particular question is like something that like you love that a lot of people aren't big fans of, or like you're an adult and you still go back and watch like this kid's movie because it's just that much fun.
Well, I mean, we went through the whole lore of Emperor's New Groove, so I mean,
Which I
there's
feel like that's a
definitely
great
that.
answer because one, it's a kid's movie. Two,
But
not
is
that
it?
many people talk about one, and they should because that was that
I
weird.
know I've found my people when
Yep.
I make a no touchy joke, and they go, "Beware the groove," and it's like if you can drop Emperor's New Groove quotes on me all day, I mean, every year anything happens is like, it's your birthday. It's the amount of times a day that movie still to this day gets quoted in this house, and my kids don't even live here anymore.
There you go. I that era of Disney from like 2000 up until probably when like Wreck-It Ralph came out in 2012, it was an interesting time.
Hmm.
And some of those like Emperor's New Groove and Lilo and Stitch, I feel like Lilo and Stitch has gotten more of the love at that point.
Yes.
And now we're getting a new one, a live action one. But Emperor's New Groove is one that just like I've watched that so many times, just absolutely love that to pieces.
Without question, I could watch that on a loop.
Yeah.
I have
Now,
watched that on a loop on car
yeah.
rides with my kids.
Well, and I imagine that too, because like I haven't had kids yet, but my wife works with kids, and there's certain Disney songs she cannot listen to anymore.
I
Um,
used to work at KB Toys. I know that pain.
oh no.
Yeah.
Let It Go certainly was one that like my wife was just done.
Done.
I
Done.
can't.
I'm so done with that. And that's post that. I mean, because I have grandnieces now. So I would get that from them. And I was like, no, no, we are not. Elsa does not live here.
Elsa's not welcome here.
No,
Now,
we're gonna treat Elsa like Bruno. We ain't talking about either one of them.
there you go. Now, John, my last question for you is what do you love most about movies?
Watching people create,
Mhm,
watching that beauty come to life. It does because it doesn't matter what it is, how what the genre, the medium, however you want to, whether it's a live action, whether
mhm.
it's animation, whether it's a comedy, whether it's a drama, whether it's puppets. You know I don't know how I've gone through an entire interview and not talked about the Muppets yet. But
I love the Muppets.
there's my Muppets mention, but you know, it's the fact that it doesn't matter
Mhm,
what it is, people put their heart and soul into something.
mhm,
I think that's why we have so many things that movies that transcend whether it's a good movie or a bad movie, like the love of bad film, you
Mhm.
know, the you know the crappy cinema, the John Waters movies,
Yeah.
that are crap on purpose, but with purpose, you
Yeah.
know. All the way to things like The Room that just become, my God, this is unwatchable, but I can't take my eyes off of it because that man threw his heart and soul into it, and he's
Mhm.
soul puking all over that set, and you can't take your mind. That's what I love about film. That's what I love about the stage. That's what I love about rock and roll music when it's done right and not
Mhm.
controlled by corporate entities trying to sell you something.
Yep.
You know, that's why I'm a punk show is was the end all be all for me as a kid because those people played with their balls,
Mhm.
and that if you're not playing from your balls, you're not acting from your balls, whether you have them or you have another appendage. It doesn't matter if you're not singing from there.
Mhm.
Don't come to me. If you're not acting from there, don't come to me. If you're not framing that up and trying to get somebody to feel something down in there because you've got this beautiful angle and this light coming in and it hits them just right and you're going, oh, look at the glint in his eye, don't come to me. That's what I love about these art forms because
Awesome.
it makes people think, it makes them cry, it makes them laugh, it makes them forget their shitty existence for two
Mhm.
hours at a clip and hopefully give them perspective to go back and make it less shitty.
Absolutely. Three quick thoughts. One, I know you mentioned you're a punk fan. I'm a big progressive rock fan, and I love Rush. And I don't think they listen to a note from anybody ever, in terms of what
No,
kind of
they
music they.
absolutely did not. No.
Yeah, absolutely did not. And two, I was this close to bringing up Muppets Christmas Carol when you brought up Patrick Stewart, because the fact that Michael Caine completely committed to Scrooge acting against a bunch of puppets
He
is
was the
just,
greatest Scrooge ever.
yep.
Greatest Scrooge ever.
It's
And Patrick's played him and did a beautiful job. But no,
mm,
no. Michael Caine's Scrooge, he walked into that and was like, I'm gonna play this like I am doing, a BBC Christmas. This is it.
yeah,
Is I don't care the other actors are puppets.
yeah.
And it
And we
and it
treated them all
works.
like actual actors.
It's like, yeah, and the best comment I've ever heard about that is Michael Caine played the Christmas Carol like all of the Muppets were other actors, whereas in Muppet Treasure Island,
Treasure Island.
Tim Tim Curry played it like he was just another Muppet,
Yep.
and
Which
it
is true,
and
hundred
and they
percent true.
and they both work beautifully for what they are, and you couldn't watch it any other way.
My only note on Muppet Treasure Island was I could have used at least one other Tim Curry musical number. But I do appreciate the meta reference that he makes. It's my only one voice, and then going into his musical number. And then lastly, Ed Wood is my favorite Tim Burton movie, and I love that movie because he did not make great movies,
No.
but he made them with everything. And that's what's so charming about that film. And
And
Tim
what's so
Burton,
charming
obviously,
about his films?
yeah,
It's why they've stood the test of time. Why we made a biofilm about the man.
exactly. And why I have watched Plan 9 from Outer Space, which is wild.
Oh, it's
Wild.
just it's should not be watched ever, but you can't take your eyes off of it.
Exactly. Now, I felt bad because I didn't prepare you for this, but how I always wrap up my show is I let my guest ask me a question. So, what would you like to ask the Wasteland reviewer?
Why did you decide to do this? What put you into the mindset to be I need to review movies and talk to people about movies?
So, like longer timeline. I've been doing an article series on my website about like I talk about a film and not like the film, but the context in my life that it means. And I just wrote one about Cool Hand Luke because it was the first movie I watched in a cinema class in high school. And that class changed my whole perspective on like I wasn't just watching movies anymore. I was watching an art form and understanding like how this all came together, thinking about it in a different way. I joined film club for all 4 years of my undergrad at Rider University, and that really opened up my perspective on film and watching new film and learning about it. I took a great performances on film class in college as one of my electives. I have a master's in accounting, so that was like my fun class that I wanted to take. That was with one of my other interests. And Dr. Mills, who taught that class, loved Johnny Depp. I think we spent a whole entire month just on Johnny Depp. Um,
I like him
um,
already.
but it was one of those kinds of things where after a while I had the nudge was my now wife and I had been together for over 2.5 years the first time we were together, and then we broke up for 3 years. And I remember when we broke up, and I'm like, I wanted to try to find something that was like me, to like a little bit more creative. And I made a Facebook page and started writing reviews on it. And then it turned into I'd rather talk at a camera and do
Just typing
this. So
things for the birds.
which is funny because I've circled back around and I do actually really enjoy doing the writing reviews now too. But I've been doing this my YouTube channel for since 2016. So I've been doing this for a while, and I started this particular show, which this is, I think, what episode is this? I'm gonna check real quick. But I've been doing this show since the pandemic, like fall 2020, because at first I'm like, I need to talk to people. And this is the 246th episode.
See?
And it's just been so much fun being able to connect with people. And every conversation I feel like I have, it has broadened my perspective on movies and learning from other people, and just this makes me love movies even more. So honestly, like I have a full-time job and a part-time job at a college. Like this is my fun stuff that I do. And if it becomes more, and it has certainly grown since I started just talking at my webcam, making random videos. This is all just like everything else on top of it's just extra. It's just like I love movies and getting a chance to talk about them. And especially when like I see a film like circling this all back around, like Eephus, that it's like this isn't a big film. Like this isn't
No.
getting the 4,000 theater rollout and stuff like that. But being able to see a film and share my thoughts on it, and it makes other people want to go check it out, that's awesome, and it makes
And,
me really
and it
happy.
and
So,
being able to do it for smaller films like ours, it
mhm,
means a lot to us who make them because we don't usually get a lot. I mean, you know, Eephus being the weird one, of
mhm,
things that I've done because we did get some big names that took a look at us. I mean, we've get written up in lots of big papers, and
yeah,
we were lucky enough to be at con, and I still to this day don't believe that that actually happened.
mhm,
But it it means tons to those of us that make them, because we're not the ones that are making, $1 million movies, we're
mhm,
we're 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 jobbers. I mean, I still have my day job. I work a
yep,
9 to 5. I'm not, you know, rolling in it because I do movies. This is like a glorified hobby for me. I just kind of get paid for it on the side. It's like a
mhm,
side gig that, is more fun than driving an Uber. So,
yeah,
it's like it becomes one of those things where it's like we anybody that's willing to like talk about what we've made that, might get someone else to check it out,
mhm,
especially when you've got young filmmakers. I mean, a lot of the people that I've worked with, over the last, 3, 4 years have been, you know, late 30s, early 20s, a kind of age range. And
yeah,
they're, they're the ones that are building the next generation of cinema.
mhm,
And to be able to see that happen and hear people like yourself appreciate it and then encourage other people to go out and take a look at
mhm,
it, and get these guys the eyes on their work that they deserve.
yeah.
It's fantastic. and I don't think we appreciate out loud enough the people that watch our movies.
Well, and like I feel very lucky with the opportunities that I get. And tomorrow, like case in point, I'm going to be seeing A Working Man 2 days early, getting to see the new Jason Statham movie, and that's an Amazon movie. Obviously they had a lot of money to that, but I one of the most awesome things, especially over the past year, I feel like it has. I I don't say no when I get because like I know a lot of my friends that do this too, and they're very picky on what they wind up checking out and stuff like that. I've been so lucky to have actual filmmakers reach out to me and like, hey, will you check out my film? I'm like, if you are taking the time to reach out to me and really want to hear my opinion on it, and I have the time, like I want to watch it
Yeah.
and be able to give it a review and share my thoughts. And this has been awesome because this started with me like interviewing my wife and my friends, and then some critics and stuff like that. And then it's turned into I've gotten a chance to meet a lot of great filmmakers and actors and stuff like that through this. And at this point, I'm organically making connections like this and getting a chance to talk about movies. And this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it really definitely was. Absolutely.
But John, thank you so much for your question, and thank you so much for your time to come on here and talk about yourself and your love of movies and acting, and especially getting a chance to talk about Eephus.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. I thank you for having me. It was a blast. It was an
Absolutely.
absolute blast.
And yes, go check out in the description to see when Eephus is coming around to you. But most importantly, thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.